Hello, I'm recording this February 1st, 2024, and this is the night, early morning, right after the night that the plane crashed in Philadelphia, the day after two planes crashed in DC, and I've been looking at those stories a little bit tonight. Pretty crazy. Possibly terrorist or possibly something going on with the timing and the way the two crashed, possibly different. um, I'm thinking possibly retaliation for the United States involvement in Gaza. Just a thought, but crazy world we're living in, strange times, and kind of ties into what I wanted to talk about on this video, which is what is literature and what is the importance of it. And literature is the written word, uh, basically some kind of longer form written word work that communicates both universal truths and ideas about human life and meaning, and also applies those universal truths to the specific time that the piece is written. That's my definition. That's what I think. I think it's a decent definition. Good literature. People say literature as opposed to fiction that's just good plot entertainment. Literature is fiction that, or poetry or prose, that communicates better than anything else at that time the deepest, most important truths that humans collectively, as a social group, need to hear to be mentally, spiritually healthy and aware, because often we are not very aware of what we should be aware of. We have huge problems and issues. And good literature, good art, everything, but with the written word, the good literature is the kind of writing that teaches, awakens the most essential things for human beings at that time, and connects human beings of a particular time to the deepest universal truths, principles, even morality wrapped up in it, spirituality, the deepest positive awareness that human beings can have. So that's my definition of literature. And the next question is, do we have great literature being written and being read today? And I touched on this on some of my earlier videos a little bit, but in my opinion, no. Not really. The last great literature I think we had written, published, read, I mean, maybe there's stuff out there that's great, but nobody reads it or it doesn't get published now. That's something that can be debated. But I think the last great writing tapered off maybe around the mid 20th century, although there's a few things later that I would say are pretty great. But one of the standards for great literature is that it's not just repeating great literature from the last generation. It's not just copying. It brings something new and original to the table in the way that it brings those universal truths and qualities and relates them to the current time. The great literature that I think of is, you have ancient stuff. You have Shakespeare, the Bible, some of any of those old texts. It's great. I haven't read Japanese epics and the Persian epics. And a lot of those you have to include because they were so deeply forged so deeply in those ancient cultures, and certainly have to include some of that. As far as modern stuff, which is a little different because you have more individual writers making more idiosyncratic literature. It's not following as many conventions. The development of the novel, and then the novel gets more and more idiosyncratic. And it's just a different expression of art. And some of that is because in the modern world, we have more artists, more capability of printing books, just more the wheels of art production are greased a lot more because we have a lot of material wealth for various reasons. So modern literature is a little different than ancient literature. There's just more of it, and it's a little more individualized and a little more colorful and expressive maybe. But the modern literature, it also kind of follows it follows Western civilization more. Western civilization was the civilization that's on top. A lot of the ancient literature flourished when a particular civilization was at its peak, at its most powerful point. And in the contemporary era, that's Western civilization, Europe, then transitioning to the U.S., and then transitioning to the globalization of this regime, industrial regime. But it flows through Europe and then the United States too. And what you have during the modern period, the late 19th century and 20th century, is artists reacting to negatively, mostly, to aspects of the modern world. That was the main kind of a thematic continuity to what literature was wanting to communicate to humanity, to create some kind of spiritual balance, because the world was out of balance. So in the modern novel, you have that kind of questioning thing going way back, even to something like Moby Dick. You had whaling was a central industry at the time for oil, so it was had that industrial element, and then Melville takes it to a symbolic level as a search for meaning, kind of pretty dark, pretty wide-ranging, a bit nihilistic, as he uses the whaling journey as a kind of a metaphor for maybe human civilizational searching, and maybe the kind of meaninglessness at the end of a lot of that. And that's 19th century, and that same theme of unease and critique of modern life in the 20th century continues from the 19th. You have, let's say, Faulkner, who was much, early 20th century to mid 20th century. Even in him, the way he addresses universal issues and problems was more in the subject matter he chose. He was writing about very rural, sort of twisted, backward people, and also his style, which he kind of borrowed from Joyce in a lot of ways, which is disjointed, hard to follow, very descriptive, very poetic, beautiful, but also hard to follow, and jarring a little bit. And it puts you as the reader in a place where you're encountering weird subjects and weird ways of speaking. It's disorienting, but also mesmerizing and kind of beautiful, because it takes you out of the modern industrial world a bit, and gives you something alien. And why is that appealing? Because we need something that different to feel balanced, because the world as it's set up is out of balance. So that's just an example of a writer of great literature from the 20th century that wasn't even, it's not so obviously addressing issues in the modern world, but is doing it, just not as obvious as others. And James Joyce is another one, but more obviously confronting the modern world directly. But at the same time, it's writing something beautiful. Literature is beautiful too. It is entertainment, but it's entertainment with depth that goes all the way to nourishing you and making you a wiser person for reading, making you more aware of the world and what human beings should be doing with their lives and collectively with society. A vision of other possibilities besides what's there. And the great works of literature do that. James Joyce's Ulysses certainly does. It just expands your mind and critiques the contemporary world powerfully. Almost satire, a lot of that book. If you get past, the 20s, 30s, 40s in the 20th century, I think you start to get copycats, to where people are looking back to Joyce, Faulkner, some of the Nietzsche, some of the philosophers, all that, some of the flowering of the early 20th century, and they're kind of regurgitating it. There's a lot of irony, Kurt Vonnegut or Samuel Beckett. Some of that later stuff is not as original as early 20th century literature was. And I think that is good literature dying in our contemporary culture. There's a few later books. I did a video about David Foster Wallace and Infinite Jest, and that's like a candidate from, is that great literature? Does it have something profound to say to the world, or is it a little bit more regurgitation of older insights from older writers, and maybe not as deep? I go with the latter on that. I don't think it is great. It's close, maybe. There is probably the newest book that I definitely that I love, and I think is probably great literature, is Philip K. Dick, the Valis. I don't know how to say it even. It's a weird book that he wrote after. It's not even maybe fiction. It's very autobiographical, but it's fantastical, and it's all about his kind of a transcendental experience, searching confusion about religious questions and confusion in the modern world. Very disjointed, funny, but weird, and very honest. I think he was actually had something of a nervous breakdown, and this book is different from his earlier stuff that all the movies are made from. That's more, great, good science fiction. But this is just philosophical searching and confusion and deeply honest expression of that. But he's a good writer and a creative guy, and it's entertaining and funny, but also there's a lot of trauma there and a lot of genuine struggle and searching that is profound. I think that's a great book. That might be the last book that came out in 1980 or 81. For me, that's the last one I know of that I would say, well, that is powerful and original and well written, good art. After that, I don't have anything myself after in 1980. So maybe I've missed a few things, but I think also what you have at that time is our society is it's breaking down for a lot of complicated, deep reasons. You could ask a bunch of people and get a bunch of different answers. Capitalism is evil, industrialism is evil, just the empire is playing out, we're running out of resources, complicated questions. And you hear these issues debated all the time, and it's good to explore those issues deeply and try to find the truth. But that's hard, and I think as a society we've lost the ability to really comprehend our problems. In the early 20th century, when a lot of those great novels were written, it was all you could expect from an artist, that they just have a deep sense of unease about the current situation and maybe feel out for some solutions. But now, 100 years later, it's time that we got clearer and more specific ideas about what society's problems are. And we haven't gotten there. There's too much confusion, even among people who might be writing literature, to write something great because they're too confused. And the whole society's confused, so the publishing industry has kind of lost its way. It's more than ever about just making money. It's more than ever about repeating past successes. It doesn't even... And I mean, how much can you expect the publishing industry to be creative and visionary itself? It does have to come from the writers and people reading. It just kind of all breaks down together. The work's not being written. There's the people that would appreciate it if it was are not able to really appreciate it like they may have been in past decades or centuries when it was easier, when the problems were in this society were less crucial and less uh, immediately urgent. As things break down, everything kind of breaks down. People don't read like they used to. The internet is part of it, but people do read, but they read like, for escapism. They read the bestseller type stuff, and people aren't as interested in deeper literature. But it may not be because they're not interested. It might be because it's not available. What would it be? There's like a lot of imposter literature that doesn't really satisfy you. This is my opinion, because it's not as deep as it pretends to be, or whatever you have. A lot of angsty kind of modern-y stuff, but it's all just going back to 100 years ago, kind of nihilism or something, basically. Or you have multicultural stuff, which is bringing new authors with different backgrounds to prominence. But do they have universal deep insights, or do they just have a different flavor of conformity, or a different flavor of regurgitating insight and art from past decades and centuries? A lot of times it's not truly original and universal enough to be powerful. There's a lot of historical fiction, also there's genre fiction, sci-fi, and whatever, things that don't deal with the contemporary situation. They kind of escape it because it's too complicated and too hard, and nobody knows how to address it. So, what is literature? I'm kind of giving that a definition. Do we have good literature out today? I think it's very scarce and been going downhill for a while. What do you think is great literature past 1980? Great universal stuff. Do you have any that you want to put in the comments that I may have not even heard of? Because I kind of checked out a lot of contemporary stuff because I just didn't think it was going to be quality. And everything I look into, I'm disappointed by it to some extent. The originality and the deep ideas and ability to confront our problems today just isn't there a lot of the time. But what am I missing? Anything? That's about my rant, and my definition of what literature is. I think it's still valuable to read in bad times, which was what we're in. The world's getting bad and probably going to get worse. But a good literature can center you. It gives you a feeling for what it means to be as fully alive as you can be, and that's what everybody wants. If you don't get that, you tend to want to just escape. Read a good story with a fun plot, but it's kind of silly, but you're just escaping. That's okay too. But we need stuff that really hits the deepest questions, and we need to face our problems. And one of the ways we do that is in literature. And we need more of that. And, I think people would want that if it's well done, if they knew it was out there. But there's a lot of things that are preventing great literature from getting out, or being written, or being appreciated, all the above. What to do about it, I don't know. But if you find something good, it's probably even more valuable than ever before, because it's getting rarer and rarer. And the old literature is still good to appreciate what literature can be, even though it's a little dated. So that's it. That's my thought. Be good.